Hello and welcome to another episode of Philippa Squared, Parenting by Design. I'm joined by my beautiful co-host Pippa. Hi Pippa.
Hello, Philippa. How are you today?
Fabulous. Thank you very much for asking. And we have a fabulous guest with us today, Carli Saber, who is a holistic parenting coach. Thank you for joining us, Carli.
Hello, thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
We're going to have a fabulous conversation because we have so many things that we align on. Is interesting. Just before hitting record, we were talking about the idea that, well, you were talking about the idea that, once we get to end of baby, the support tends to just kind of stop, and the information tends to start to dry up in terms of how do we do this parenting gig, right? And and it's a big thing as a birth and parenting coach with 4 children who are now in their teens and beyond. I know that to be true. Once they got to the end of baby, it was like, okay, this is a whole new challenge. So can you tell us a bit about how you got into the work that you do and how you work with parents?
Sure. So I studied education and psychology at uni, and I wasn't completely aligned with the mainstream education system. So that led me into learning about Maria Montessori and her teaching philosophy. And I went on to be a Montessori teacher. And I love her philosophy. I love just teaching the style of Montessori. It's just beautiful guiding the child. It's a philosophy as well as a teaching method. But I was having an issue in my classroom where I was seeing all these children with low confidence, special needs, just a lot going on. And, now speaking to a lot of professionals as well as other teachers, I think this is just the norm. Most schools are having lots of children now with these different needs and complex situations. But yeah, I was a very burnt out. I had a lot of anxiety going to school because I was just spreading myself very thin for these children. Um, but what I really saw is like the issue wasn't the child, it was a lot of the time the parents. And you know what the parents are speaking about, you know how they're speaking, you know everything about parents just by connecting with the child. Um, and I really, I wanted to work deeply in a more holistic way. So I was always really quite into that. And that first delved me into homeschool consulting. So I'm really big in the homeschool space. And if you have a child not fitting in the school environment, I support that. And then that led me into doing just more support. And I was doing Psych K. I learned about Psych K, a healing modality for myself because of my school anxiety. But as soon as I did this, I was like, this is the thing that I need to share with families and children. Like, this is the missing piece. It's not about me talking. It's not about us practicing X, Y, and Z. It is about clearing out, that deep rooted fluff that's sitting on that subconscious level that you girls know all about, to create those deep rooted, long lasting change, and that's what we all want. That's real, those real big shifts.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting. I was speaking with a client recently about what was holding her back from asking for help because she identified that she had some significant issues around her parenting, and she thought she'd dealt with all her stuff, but then parenting brought up this. All of a sudden there's a magnifying glass, right? And if there's anything going on, it's going to amplify it. It's going to make it so much bigger. It's not just going to make it go away because you haven't got time for it. So she had thought she'd done all the work, and then it turned out, well, she hadn't, because she was still having these responses or reactions actually to her children that were causing her to repeat the cycle that she desperately didn't want to repeat. And we talked about, well, what stops you then from reaching out and getting some help? Why haven't you done that? She said, well, it's the shame. There's so much shame for me around asking for help, around me not getting it right, even though I've done all of this work. And I thought that was really insightful, because so often we don't even speak about the shame that we hold. but there is no, and I was actually thinking while I was in the shower before, I was thinking, I need to do a reel on this, the shame that we face as parents. We know there's no manual, we know there's no handbook, and yet we feel shame when we haven't got it all right, when we haven't done all the work or don't know what to do. And so we feel too much shame to reach out. So I totally hear what you're saying. And some of that shame actually comes from, or a lot of it comes from our own childhood, those unconscious core beliefs that we hold and the trauma that's sitting in our unconscious, not yet dealt with. Would you agree?
Yeah, totally. Yes. And it's why I feel so passionate as well about it, is because it's like so taboo, really. Everyone's trying to be this perfect parent because they want, to bring out these perfect children, or they might have children that aren't perfect, but to turn around and go like, oh, this might be because of the things that I'm doing. It's just very confronting, and the world doesn't really, we don't speak about it. It's like parenting is like year-long meditation courses, but we don't really speak about as being hard, on and acknowledging it's being hard. Like, it's kind of like you're just meant to love it all the time. And of course you love it, but it's super triggering. And you have to you're faced with that magnifying glass, as you said, and you have to clear stuff. It's not going to go away. It gets worse because your child is there being like, reminder, reminder, reminder. So totally, yes, I totally agree with all that you just said.
They're like a mirror to us, right? So if our child is experiencing something, and then we really need to look at ourselves and ask ourselves what it is in us that's creating that for them. And I can't tell you how many times I've had a parent come to me and say, will you work with my child? They do this. And I say, well, yes, I can, but not until after you and I have done the work. And when you and I have done the work, then and only then will I teach you what you can do to support and help your child. And then after that, if it's still not enough, then yes, I'll work with your child. Because you said something before, if we send a child to get therapy, or if we send a child to work with someone, the inherent message they receive is, I'm not good enough, or something's wrong with me. And we don't want to keep perpetuating that cycle. We want to fix what we can within ourselves, and then learn how to support them through whatever they're going through. And as a mother of 4 neurodivergent children, and not knowing they were neurodivergent until my eldest was 16, my youngest was 10. So I went through their whole younger years not knowing. But that's, in some ways, I didn't have a label. I didn't know what I was dealing with, so that was harder. But they were who they were, and I just accepted them for who they were, and all the hard bits and all the easy bits and all the tactile stuff and the bits and pieces that came with all of that. But certainly having the diagnosis also meant then having language around it, which helped my children be able to communicate to me in a whole new way. Again, shame is often associated with that sort of thing. I spoke to a teacher yesterday. My daughter had an issue at school. I spoke to her, and her first question was, is she on medication? I said, no, because for my daughter, I don't need to give her medication for autism. Autism is a different way of thinking. I need to have her in all of her glory, be able to figure out how to adapt the world to her, or herself to the world, in whatever that situation calls for her to be able to move through into her adult years, not just numb her so she can't, so she relies on something to be able to fit the box, which doesn't work for everyone.
Yes, yeah.
So lots there, and there wasn't even a question in that. just
Yeah,
me
but
rambling.
you've gone through it, so you really get it. But that accepting piece can take a while. And if you've got a child with autism or a learning difficulty that you have yourself, and it might have been undiagnosed or diagnosed but not accepted and supported, and all medicated, then it's very confronting when then you have to go through it again and you feel all those feelings and you don't want your child to feel them. So you try, you have to learn to really accept them and as you said, build the world around them to support them and having them shove it into this box or be this specific person.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really it's interesting for me, having journeyed this whilst my children were mostly in their teens and preteens. And when my eldest was 16, I'd already had several years of teenage years, obviously, to be, to have boundaries and things like that tested and so on. And one of the things that took my oldest two children longer to process was the fact that I had changed in terms of how I accepted the things that I allowed, the way that I parented changed for two reasons. First of all, we had an understanding and language around what it was we were dealing with. And secondly, I did the work. And I healed my trauma, and I was able to then step into being the mother I wanted to be and not reacting, but instead responding. And so that changed how I parented. But when you're dealing with neurodivergent children, that's not fair. And it's a whole process then of having them accept your new parenting style. So as they get into teenagers, you then have a whole new level of other people judging you that doesn't happen quite the same when they're littler, and they think and they believe things, right? Because once they get to teenagers, all of a sudden you lose knowledge. You don't know anything anymore. So there's a whole nother level that goes on there when you're dealing with older children.
Totally, yeah. And I was actually speaking to a client about this yesterday, and it was about that whole transition where your children become tweeny and they want to be that teenager, and the teenager and the adolescence, it is all about being an adult and being seen as an adult. And it is, you have to shift in order to then see them as not this child anymore, but as this adult that wants to be seen and respected as an adult, even though they really need a parent and they can't have the same responsibilities as an adult yet. But this is this observation and real big support you need to give the child as they transition. You have to transition with them to keep them there, because so many people have that fear that the teenager is going to push away or want nothing to do with them. And the reason why that shows up and it happens is because the parents still teaching them as this child that they were and now they've transitioned to. And again, as you say, there was this another layer having neurodivergent children as well on top of that. So yeah, it's extremely complicated human experience, parenting, that you have to really hold as your children grow.
Absolutely.
So true, Carli. So true. I mean, this is such a valuable conversation, isn't it? And one of the things I'd love to explore with you, Carli, is with parents that are parenting kids that are neurodivergent, what tips do you guys have for parents out there that are living this, that don't really know that there is actually a style of parenting, a philosophy that we can actually employ for the kids? What points would you give to those people?
Sure. So I would say a couple of things. The first things I would say is always follow your intuition. Because you know your child the best, no matter what label they have. And this is obviously for all parents. But it is, you've got this child that is different and needs to be on a medication to show up in the way that society expects from them. But if that's not going to work for you, and you know that you don't want to do that for your child, or you know your child needs something else, then doing that fearlessly. And that's why I did go into the homeschool space, because there's so many children that don't fit this mainstream model, and people have so much fear around homeschooling. But I was like, no, you can do it, and this is how you get started. And oh my God, your child will be a different child. They'll be so confident. They're going to learn because their brain is developing. So you don't learn at school. You're always learning. So that is my first thing. Follow your intuition, no matter what society is telling you. Do what you think is going to be right for your child, and find the tribe that's going to support that. So that's the first thing. The second thing is observe your child. So we are constantly looking for the answers out there, you know, reading the books, finding the specialists. But you know, mostly people come to me and they ask me, what should I do, blah, blah, and I go, well, what's your child doing? And they're pretty much telling you what they need. So through that observation, listening to that child and really seeing what they're guiding, what they're needing to guide them, that will tell you what they need. And then, as we were speaking about before, doing the work, because if you're faced with a child that is neurodivergent, it's going to be triggering. You know, I don't think it would be confronting, especially if, you know, you may have tendencies, shame may come up, your own stuff is going to come up. But once you shift it, so you're not talking to them or supporting them from a stress, fight, flight response, and you're just coming to them with total support, total acceptance, it's going to just allow them to understand who they are. You're going to help them to find their needs. And yeah, it's very hard to answer that question broadly, because neurodivergent children, within that there's a spectrum, and within that is personalities and individuality. So you can't give any humans a dot points of what to do. We're humans, we're complex, and a child is going to have different needs. And I have children with the same diagnosis needing completely different things, and one thing works for the other, one thing wouldn't work for the other. For one, you know, it depends on the child.
Exactly. But the points that you actually mentioned about observing a child and about seeking help, you know, and trusting your intuition, I mean, that's the foundation, isn't it? That's the foundation of parenting, no matter what.
Yes, and I'm sure
Let's face it.
we would just all agree on that. Like, this is what we do. We bring parents back to their intuition, because we know how to do this, you know?
Yeah, sometimes we just don't realize that we know how to do it.
Totally.
Yeah.
And I think there is value in asking for help, right? I had Paisley with me earlier, and I did a video recording because I heard something through the week and I thought that makes sense and it needs expanding on. And I'll post it later today, which will be weeks ago by the time people hear this. But the idea that smart people learn from their mistakes, but smarter people learn from the mistakes of others. And you know, when we translate that to parenting, we don't have to make all our own mistakes. We can actually, you know, bring other people in who have other perspectives, who have other learnings and trainings, or they've been there before. You know, the wise woman in the village was always revered for what she could bring and give to others. And we would tell stories so that we can learn. We listen to others so that we can learn. And I would encourage people to reach out to others, and that's part of the finding the tribe, right? So some of those stories will be part of your tribe. And one of the most beautiful things I think I'm a part of is the circle that I facilitate on a Monday, which is maidens, mothers, and grandmothers. And we have women there who are not mothers or who are on the conception journey. Some of them who will never be mothers. We have others who are, you know, have their first babies. We have others who are grandmothers, and everything in between. And the beautiful thing about that is that they get to learn from and commune with those who have been before, those who can impart that wisdom and knowledge. And then obviously that, you know, sometimes you need to go and you need to get the coach, right? Who can show you what you're from a different perspective, what you're saying, you know, because often we have the answers in us. We just we can't see the forest for the trees, you know. We are so deep in our own story that we can't see sometimes what's right in front of us. So, and there's no shame in that. There's no shame in reaching out and getting support and guidance. I mean, we do it with a mechanic. We do it with our medical health often. We do it with so many other things. I mean, most people don't go and just build a house. They talk to an architect and a builder and, you know, all the things, and they get support and help. And that's really valuable.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yes.
And this is a good thing about the world today, is that it's changing. So with the likes of academics like Brene Brown, she has brought vulnerability to the forefront, that it's the sign of strength to be vulnerable
Yeah.
and to seek help and to show that, yeah, life isn't all rainbows and unicorns, you know, like we actually need help and it's okay to be vulnerable. So that is slowly changing. It's with podcasts like these and a gamut of other podcasts where we're actually talking about these topics where it can really help and facilitate that change that is needed in society.
And the children, someone said this to me, and it was just so beautiful because, you know, people ask all the time, because it's very clear that there is a shift in children. They have a lot more neurodivergency or, you know, coming with medical issues, learning difficulties. It wasn't the same as it was for teachers who are still in the classroom. So there's been a shift. And you can speculate on what that is, and everyone has different beliefs around it. But what is amazing is it's bringing up these conversations and it's bringing up change. Like schools are looking different. Homeschooling is growing. There's things that are like, hold on, like my child needs something else and the society of children needs something else. So what do we need to do in order to shift and evolve this whole world in order to support them? So it is like, it is beautiful that it's like, you know, I try not to think about why is this happening, and I've gone down those rabbit holes, but you know, to look at that positive of going, okay, they're here, so what do we need to do to support family dynamics, parents, children, and then how is this having that knock-on effect to culture and society?
Love it. Yeah, it's like a brave new world, isn't it, Carli?
Totally, yeah. Just have to constantly be positive and manifest our reality, as we all know how to do.
Yeah, man. Let's just go and do it, man.
Yeah, totally.
And I think, you know, certainly we want to have a positive outlook, but accepting, you said before, you know, parenting is hard. And there are moments within parenting that will ask you to dig so deep into your reserves of strength. And, you know, I've faced it in the last couple of weeks. We had gastro, and then I've had people with colds, and I just feel, you know, I feel like I've had to dig deep into the reservoir of my energies just to maintain the ability to be able to work as well as care for all of these people I'm responsible for or to. And so, you know, there are times when it's really hard and you don't want to show up. You don't, it would be easier to just not be there and not have to face all of that, because it can be a real struggle some days to get there. But I think in all of that, when we can accept that it is hard, when we can accept that we are going to need to, on some occasions, go to the deepest well of our reserves and pull through and understand the reason why. So often I think the reason people get lost in their parenting is because they forget their why and they forget their values in all of the really hard stuff. You know, I'm caring, you know, I help Alana care for my granddaughter. And in those moments when I'm going down yet again to help change the baby who's covered in vomit and her mother's covered in vomit and all of the things, you know, it would be easy to get frustrated and just say, well, no, I'm not showing up this time. But the reason I show up and the reason I get up and I do those things is because it aligns with my value that she should be surrounded by a village and that she should be supported to parent her child in the good and the bad, in the hard and the easy, and all that comes with that. And so I can get up and go, yes, this is what I'm doing. I'm going to show up and support her. And because it aligns with my value. And if we don't know what our values are, it's really hard to parent or co-parent or grandparent or whatever it is that we need to do, even just be a village. It's hard to show up and do that if you don't know what your why. So I would encourage people to really find their why. And it's the first module of my parenting course is what are your values and intentions as a parent. And I've mentioned that on this podcast before, but it has to come from there, because that's going to be what drives you and brings the consistency and makes everything easier, when you can actually understand what your values and intentions are. So,
Absolutely. It drives all our choices.
yeah.
All
Yeah.
our choices.
And
Yeah.
even pre-parenthood, I even see that with me and my partner, and we're getting ready for this thing in the future. But it's like all of our decisions and all of our work and stuff are getting ready for that place. So you even start preconception, it's that driving force.
Well, some do, not a lot, and not enough.
Yeah, maybe because I'm just in this field and I'm very aware of it.
Yeah, and but it's not part of what's taught in most pregnancy classes. They're not asking you to consider who you want to be as a parent, how you want to show up, what kind of mental health work have you done, what kind of inner work have you done. None of that is, and we're not even talking about that back in the old days, you tended to get married first. And we were encouraged. When I got married, we did pre-marriage counseling, and we were encouraged to talk and think about some of these things, but not that. I don't remember us ever defining the kind of values we held as parents. And so there's a gap. There's a gap in our culture that says that we can just turn up if we're lucky enough to have a baby, and we're lucky enough to be still raising children and then teenagers, that that's enough. And I think we're realizing, because of generational trauma, that it's not enough. We actually need to do the work.
Yes, that is so true. So true. Let's all do the work, everybody.
Yeah, guys, do the work.
This is what we say just about every podcast, isn't it, Philippa?
Do the work.
Do the work. But
Yeah.
I mean, from you, I know from me, Carli, from you, when you do the work, your life has a different meaning. It is deeper. You understand yourself a lot more. And what more could that be than when you're a parent?
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Wow. It just changed the whole landscape of a life of a parent. It really, really does. And you see that every day, don't you guys?
Totally. And the children, because it's, you've got a child with a problem, they've got X, Y, and Z, blah, blah, blah. And then the mama does all this work, and the child is automatically so much more happier and so much more chilled. Who would have known that? It's like, oh, okay.
It's lovely, isn't it? Yeah, it's like, could there be energy in play here, working around the household and stuff? It's quite interesting. Anyway.
It's as you said, like, people, they will do anything and give everything for their child. So the first thing is, oh, there's something going on with my child. Who can I seek to support my child? But that 5 minutes or 10 minutes of day that you can give to yourself, even if it isn't like going to see someone, it brings up guilt, it brings up lack of boundaries, but putting up those boundaries, having a 20-minute work, finding the time, no matter where you can, to just give yourself a little bit of self-care and repair. If that's like a beautiful shower or a walk, it doesn't have to be such a crazy thing. It drastically changes your mood, and then therefore the families. And it's like, you just start with 5 minutes, and it can be really confronting for parents to do, because they feel like they need to be all in, but it shifts everything. So it's really like surrendering to your space and putting on that oxygen mask and like showing up for yourself, and that knock-on effect it has for the family.
Yeah,
massive.
I think a big part of that, though, comes from this cultural expectation that our children are meant to come first, that as and this is, you know, Pippa knows this intimately, this idea that even as pregnant women, we're relegated to the vessel, and our job is to grow and birth a healthy baby, and that's the extent of our job, and then we're to grow and care for a healthy, well-rounded child, and that's our value, you know. And it's funny because, you know, I started watching The Handmaid's Tale last night, and I, you know, watching that, I'm like, this is not far off where we already are, you know, in terms of how we treat women's bodies and how we treat women as a whole and their value in society, because we don't value caregivers. So from a cultural perspective, we need to do a lot of work, and, you know, things won't change particularly until for another couple of generations, until the generation that we're birthing and bringing up now has a different view of the world, because everyone in their world views and creates a difference in that space. And I've just been reading the book Consent Laid Bare, and I cannot think of her name. An Australian woman has written it, all around consent, around sexuality and so on. And she told the riddle of a father and son being in an accident, and both were taken to different hospitals in different ambulances, and the son arrived at the hospital and the surgeon said, I can't operate on this child, he's my son. So who did the surgery? Who was the surgeon? And she racked her brain, and I stood there at my makeup desk, because I listen to podcasts while I'm putting my face on and all the things, and I sat there and I'm like, I don't understand. I'm lost, right? The surgeon was his mother, right? But until it is automatic for us to just go, oh yeah, well, it's his mum, because we don't have those social stigmas around surgeons being mostly male and so on. And as a woman, I know those things, and I was gobsmacked at myself. But she said in the book, she's like, you know, until our children, and it'll be our children's children potentially, like for me, my children's children, who will be brought up with a different culture and a different mindset, hopefully, around those things. Until all of that happens, mum guilt is going to be a thing. And putting our children first instead of doing the self-care so that our children, it's just a warped way of thinking about it, right? Instead of doing the care that we need in order to be able to show up for our kids the right way, we show up for our kids, but because we haven't done the work, it's not as good as it could be.
It's counterintuitive, isn't it, Philippa? It really is.
Yeah, it is logically, when you look at it logically, but as a mum, and I've said this before, every part of me goes, no way, I'm putting my kids first, right? And it's
because you're Mama Bear.
I am Mama Bear, 100%. And it's only been in the last couple of years, and even in the last year, where I haven't waited for everybody to serve their meal, and I've just served myself whenever Philippa, it happens.
I love that. So what changed for you? What changed where you went, no, I'm me as well?
Yeah. Well, I guess partly, I don't even know if they're coming to eat half the time. So I'm not waiting for them. And I used to make sure that Trevor, you know, had his fill and all the rest first as well. And you know, because change, whilst you can clear all this stuff instantly, and my healing was so profound, but sometimes habits take longer to change. And sometimes, particularly when they are so deeply rooted, which, you know, cultural ideals around motherhood are, and I'd been mothering for a long time by the time I'd healed. It actually took years to reframe that and go, actually, I can just eat, and I've made enough, and I don't need to wait for everybody, right?
And did your household collapse?
Nothing changed.
Nothing changed. Boom.
Except me.
Boom.
Right?
Mic drop moment, guys. Mic drop moment. Philippa, I
Yeah.
love that.
Yeah. So, you know, it can take time for these things to come in, and I think we're going to see a lot of change over the next little while, but we do have to remember that as women, the culture we live in is so deeply ingrained in us that it's going to take time for those things to shift, and little steps are required to get us
Absolutely.
to
It's
where we need
wonderful.
to go.
And it's podcasts like this, it's movements, it's a personal development world, it is personal evolution. I think I prefer the name is a lot better than that. That is actually starting to change. Like it's gaining momentum. Ever since that big pregnant pause a few years ago, people are starting to think about life and the world a little bit differently, which is fantastic. Anyway, Carli, I think we better wrap this up. What a great conversation.
Guys, yeah, it was so good.
What lasting, amazing insights would you have just to do the work, besides do the work? What would
Yeah, I think just adding, as we spoke about, you use your intuition, but obviously you seek out advice, and then from there you choose what you want to use and take, and what suits you. You know, work with children in mainstream primary schools and Steiner, Montessori, all the different ones. And another thing that we haven't really touched on as well is just understanding the characteristic and age and stage of your child. Because once you know what they are meant to be doing, and it's all quite normal, you have this deeper understanding. And once you have a deeper understanding of your child, oh, they're meant to be doing that, then you can have a deeper understanding of yourself and how you can show up to that stage of development.
Oh, I think
I
you
love
nailed
that.
it.
Love
You
that.
nailed
It does not stop. It doesn't stop at bubbers. Their brain is always going crazy and changing rapidly all through 20 to 20, what I think it's 21 or something. So
25, I think.
25, yeah.
Yeah, and you know what you just said there. Yeah, what you said there actually got me through parenting teenagers, right?
Yeah.
This particularly teenage girls and mums, right? They just knowing that their whole job in teenage years is to push you away and to develop into who they are made it bearable to
Totally.
be pushed away. Right when they got the most interesting, right? Like and without knowing that, it's like knowing that, oh, you know, at 4 months old they start to go through this leap in development, and so they're going to sleep differently, they're going to feed through the night more again, all of this stuff. Knowing that allows you to accept and be in that moment with education and understanding,
Yeah, so yeah, don't let
rather
it
than
stop.
judgment.
Totally, don't let it stop. Keep learning that developmental stuff. They have lots of different regressions. They eat lots of different foods, and as you said, it gets you through it in a whole different way.
Yeah, it becomes
Yeah,
about
here.
love and support instead of management and survival.
Micromanagement as well, isn't it?
Control.
Yeah,
Yeah.
amazing. So Carli, how can people work with you? How can they find you? We're going to put some things in the show notes, but what have you got going on?
Sure. So you can find me on my Instagram, Carli Saber. I'm sure you'll put it on there, or you can connect to me on my website, email me, put on a discovery call. If you're interested about learning more and you think you might want to work with me, if you put Philippa Squared in the discount code on the discovery call, I'll give you a 20% discount to whatever we do. And I also have loads of talks and information on my website. I've got one on primary age children, teenagers. I've got an ebook on supporting anxiety in children. So there's lots of guides there that are places that you can start and use, and freebies if you're interested in knowing all about this developmental stuff a bit more.
Amazing. Thank you
Love
so
it.
much.
Thank you, guys. It's been great.
Yeah, thanks, Carli.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining
Bye.
us for another week. Bye for now.